what the Bitcoin really means to us. And of course, we talked about freedom, but how does the world look like when we have freedom? And we thought it's a world where there's more cooperation between people. If we have one standard of value measurement, meaning Bitcoin, we can communicate better. If governments cannot corrupt money and print that, they cannot finance infinite and stupid wars because people will not be willing to pay them for that. So this is the world we imagined can happen when Bitcoin wins. And there is the word in English called amity, which means cooperation, fellowship, friendship, and harmony. And that's exactly the world that I imagine to be when Bitcoin wins.
Today, I'm excited to welcome Dusan Matuska to the podcast. Dusan is a Bitcoin educator and Amity Age co-founder and on a mission to educate 100 million people about Bitcoin by 2030 and separate money and state. Welcome to the Bitcoin Edge, Dusan.
Thank you very much, Paula. Happy to be here.
So you're a very international person. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, so I became international just recently out of a coincidence, and I will get into it. So I'm from Slovakia originally, and I've been doing Bitcoin education for about 7 years now. And my background is in education, so I used to be a tutor and teacher of mathematics, physics, and English. And I started it when I was still in high school, tutoring my friends, classmates, and later on university, I was teaching kids from 7 years old all the way to university students. So that was kind of where I really fall in love with education. And I was seeing kids thinking that they don't have genes on mathematics, but suddenly you show them a different angle and they fall in love into it and they're getting better grades, better confidence. Their parents pay them more respect. That was something I really, really loved to see. So when I got into Bitcoin, I was really immediately drawn into the education element out of it. But doing education, scaling education is kind of tough. So, you depend on grants, subsidies, and donations. And we wanted to do it in a way where we don't need to depend on that. We can sustain and finance ourselves. So that's where 3.5 years ago, we started Bitcoin mining. And we started in Slovakia first, but then we were drawn due to economic reasons and price of Bitcoin and price of electricity out. And we ended up in Paraguay. And now we're also mining Bitcoin in Ethiopia, but we later can get into it. So this is the way how we are financing our education activities. And I'm fulfilling my mission of educating 100 million people about Bitcoin and getting them or inspiring them to dive into the Bitcoin rabbit hole and become these rabbit hole explorers for the rest of their lives.
Well, you sound like a natural teacher, which is a wonderful thing. Tell us how you got into Bitcoin.
Yeah, so I was resisting for 2 years. I was first introduced to Bitcoin in 2015, but I was introduced by a friend of mine that was all into these multi-level marketing schemes and projects. So I was like when he told me about Bitcoin, when it cost like, I don't know, $100, $200, I was like, oh my God, like, no, just another of your projects, just get away from me with that. So for 2 years, I was just hearing about it from now and then and just saying, no, it's a Ponzi. It's never going to work. And then 2017 was kind of like where I really got into it when a friend of mine, a developer, a website developer, we wanted to build a website for our company. So I sit with him and I ask him, okay, Peter, so, how's life recently? And he told me, you know what, I'm not doing that many websites right now because I got into Bitcoin. I'm like, I got Peter, like they got you as well. Like, did you really fall for this? And I was like, no, Dusha, like, wait. And I really trusted him. He was a very good friend of mine. And I was like, wait, I will explain it to you. I'm like, okay, you have one chance. So start. And he was not telling me about price going up and all this money go up thing, but more about the social element of Bitcoin, like how really it can help in countries where there is a lack of financial infrastructure, banks doesn't work, and hyperinflation is soaring. And I was like pretty interested in that, but I was still like, okay, I will find the reason why it really doesn't make sense. So when I get home, I went studying anywhere I can, anything I can find. And I was like, okay, Peter, I will find the reason why it doesn't make sense. And the deeper I went that night, I was like, damn, like this is pretty interesting. So I ended up studying at like 3, 4 a.m. And I was like, okay, I need to go to sleep. The next day I woke up, I was like calling my colleagues in the work that, hey guys, I'm not going to work today. And they were like, why? I'm like, I need to study Bitcoin. And for upcoming 3 days, I just didn't work at all because I was just studying anything I could find. And I didn't find a reason or argument against what Peter was saying, because every argument I had, I just answered myself. So that's how I got into a rabbit hole. And very quickly after that, I was like, damn, this is so beautiful. I really want to, tell as many people as I can about it, and use my education background to spread Bitcoin.
So where did that take you then?
Well, so right now I'm sitting in Roatan, in the beautiful island of Caribbean, where we have our Bitcoin Academy. So this is our place, the little studio we have here. So it took me places. I started first educating in Slovakia and Czech Republic. So I was doing webinars, workshop, consultations. And in a few years, I became a self-sustainable educator. So people are paying me for my consultation time. And that was kind of my living. So that was a big dream of me, to become Bitcoin educator full time, that I don't need to, again, depend on donations, but be sustained by a direct payments. I didn't want to be kind of paid by referrals and, me pointing people to some services that I don't believe very much, but I just get a referral. No, I was really like, this is my hourly rate. If you like what I'm doing, you pay me, and I will be as objective as possible for you. And this is, I think, how all the financial services should be done. Because if you're paid by the people selling those services, then you're not very motivated and incentivized to be very objective. So I was doing this for a couple of years, and then we decided to scale it up again, and not depending on donations. We were like, okay, how are we going to do that? And I met a co-founder of mine. His name is Gabriel. It was really funny because he was one of my students. So he came to my free class. I had these 30-minute classes where people subscribed for free. And I had this policy that I will wait 10 minutes for people to show up. If they don't, maybe they forgot or they didn't want to go. So I just turn it off. So it was 8 minutes into the class. I was like, okay, this guy is not showing up. So I almost closed the window, and he just appeared there. I was like, hey, guy, I did it. First time using Zoom. So he was super excited that he really managed to get in. I'm like, okay. So we had this 20, 30 minutes of discussion, pretty nice one. He was asking questions. He was a gold bug at the time. And 2 minutes before the end, he was like, Dusan, so for this Bitcoin mining, like, you know what it is? I'm like, yeah, I know what it is. So you need a cheap electricity, right? I'm like, yeah. Because one of my family members, my mother-in-law, she owns a power plant. I'm like, okay, that's pretty interesting. And maybe we can speak with her and ask if she would be willing to, allow us to mine there. I was like, okay, let's explore it. So I did the math behind it. We went to her, we pitched the idea, and she was like, guys, it's amazing. I had so many people asking me to do mining here, but I was like, no, I don't care. But you are my family. You can start here. So this is how we kind of get into mining, just out of a sake that we had a family member owning a power plant, a small one, nothing big, 0.5 megawatts biogas. But we started there, and I told to my clients, like, hey guys, we are buying this container, we are buying these machines. Would you join us? We can host your machines. And in a matter of a few weeks, we filled up the whole container. I'm like, oh my God. So now it's becoming serious. Now people are sending us machines. So the investment was like more than $1 million. I'm like, damn it, that's a responsibility to have right now. So that's how we started. We opened the second container. We filled it up quickly as well. So it was a couple of hundreds of machines. And since then we started to scale, right? So that's how we started and ended up right now in Paraguay and Ethiopia and sitting in Honduras. So out of really coincidences, I became international.
It's funny how things work.
Yeah, universe is playing games with me.
So your mission is to educate 100 million people. Is that going to be through mining, and therefore people invest in the mining, and that's how you educate people?
Well, why 100 million? When I was sitting about a few years ago and like thinking about something measurable, like, okay, I want to do Bitcoin education, but what is the milestone? What is the goalpost, right? And I wanted to have something measurable and something so big that I would need to think completely differently, because, educating one city, it's kind of, what to do. So I said, okay, let's do 100 million. Why not? And one of the reasons was like, okay, there's 100 million sats in one Bitcoin, so it's a nice number. And educating 100 million people is like, okay, you cannot do it alone. You cannot do it, going person by person. There needs to be something different. So that's why I set it up, and I started like, okay, how it's even achievable. Then I thought about, okay, what does it mean to educate that person? Because I don't feel I'm fully educated on Bitcoin. I don't think anyone can ever be. So then I rephrased it a little bit that I want to welcome 100 million people in the Bitcoin rabbit hole, because that's something you can really do. You can inspire them to get into it with a book, with an article, with a video, with a session, with something, and then they go on their own journey. And it's easily measurable when the person is entering or has entered the rabbit hole or when not, right? So that's kind of the vision that I have right now. And how to do it. I don't think I can do it alone. I don't want to do it alone. And one of the reasons, or one of the things I did behind it, is we started this project called Bitcoin Educators Academy. And this is the academy that the goal of it is to bring more educators into the space. And why? There is one Bitcoiner, a YouTuber in Czech Republic. His name is Kitsom. He has a huge YouTube channel, like 100,000 subscribers already, which is pretty kind of big in a Bitcoin only space. And the reason why he's so big and popular is that he's doing it only for Czechs and Slovaks in local language, knowing the local culture, understanding the culture, being himself. And I was like, okay, if you want to really orange pill the world, we cannot do it all in English. We need to do it locally with understanding the local culture, approaches, problems, and everything. So I don't see a platform being one platform to kind of orange pill the world. I see everybody like it's being decentralized and local. So I was like, I would love to help people who are passionate about Bitcoin and education to become educators, become full-time educators, that they can really have it as a job, be financially sustainable, and become these kind of orange lighthouses of hope for their own communities. So with this mission, the project was created. It's not about explaining what is Bitcoin. It's about teaching people how to train or how to communicate Bitcoin further to their communities. So we focus, it's a 3-day intense academy for maximum 10 people. And it's about soft skills of Bitcoin. So how to handle objections, how to not jump into arguments, how to debunk the myths, how to use and create Bitcoin analogies, and a lot of things about the soft skills of teaching Bitcoin. Because I met during my journey a lot of Bitcoiners who are amazing technically, right? They understand Bitcoin profoundly. But whenever they encounter a newbie or a family member, they start to tell all this jargon and you feel like you're drinking from a fire hose. And sadly, then the newbies are disconnect. They disconnect and they're like, okay, this is not for me. This is too technical. This is too overwhelming. And that's very sad because a lot of people are discouraged by not proper communication of Bitcoin, either being too hyped, either being too, skeptical about the current state. And so various reasons why they are discouraged by Bitcoiners who are like over passionate. So this is what I realized, like how I can help is educating the educators and bringing my knowledge, because I was teaching train the trainer academies in the past for 2 years in Europe. And I was also teaching public speaking workshops. So I basically combined the knowledge, public speaking, communication, train the trainer plus Bitcoin, and created this cocktail called Bitcoin Educators Academy. And this is what we are spreading right now. So we did 7 of them this year. We started in January in Bratislava, in Slovakia. We did Salvador, Hungary, Germany, Switzerland, Czech Republic, Slovakia. We are planning Edinburgh next year, Italy, Canada, and a couple of other countries. So I would love this project to be kind of the flagship of METH, of our company.
Wow, that really sounds amazing. Tell us a little, how do you orange pill people?
It's very individual. There's no one recipe, one strategy fits all. So initially, I always want to understand if the person even has a problem, because Bitcoin is just a solution. If a person doesn't see a problem with the financial world, everything works for them, Bitcoin for them is useless. Just like, you will not buy a hammer if you don't have a nail to put into the wall. Why would you buy that? So first of all, I really want to understand if the person perceives a problem, and mostly yes, either with some, bank issues, high fees, not controlling their own money. Sometimes I ask questions about, if they have control over their own money, what would happen if their bank closed down, or some questions like helping them understand what's the reality of a legacy financial system, or telling them stories from other countries, what happened when we trusted governments and banks too much. So mostly people have this problem, but they don't see Bitcoin as a solution. So then I try to explain them how using Bitcoin really looks like in terms of control of your own money, privacy, censorship resistance, inflation hedge, and all of that. So if they resonate, then I go further and explain them. We set up a wallet and everything. I don't try to push Bitcoin to people. I used to do it initially when I was overhyped and I wanted to tell about Bitcoin to everybody and just like, hey, you need to use it and you need to use it as well. Right now, I'm more kind of a slower paced, and I don't go into discussions where just people don't want to learn. They just want to hate. They just want to troll. It's kind of a waste of time for me, I think. People know that I do education. They approach me. So when the student is ready, the teacher is always there, I would say. And it can be me or somebody else. So I always want to make sure that the person has a touch with Bitcoin, like a hands-on thing. So setting up a wallet, buying Bitcoin. For example, here in our academy, we have a Bitcoin ATM, a big one, the only one on the Roatan. But then we have also a small Lightning ATM where people can buy for 0% fee. And this is what we are doing just to make them start. We set them up with a wallet, either it's a Blink wallet, Phoenix, wallet of Satoshi. They put in dollars and receive Bitcoin immediately, and then they can pay for their coffee. So they can have the full experience in a matter of 5 minutes. And the inspiration for that came from Parallel Polis, which originated in Czech Republic in Prague. We did the Slovak version. Sadly, we needed to close it down when COVID came, but that's what we were doing. We're accepting only crypto at the time, meaning Litecoin, Bitcoin mostly, or Monero as well. And basically, we didn't accept any fiat. So a lot of people turned at the door. It was like, okay, I cannot pay with euros, so I don't want a coffee. But we onboarded hundreds of people because they're like, yeah, why not to try it out? And it really took 5 minutes, setting up a wallet, buying Bitcoin, paying with that. They had a full experience. And this is where a lot of people said, like, that's where they really started to understand it and started to appreciate it, that it's not complicated, not too technical. Anybody can use it, just like internet. We don't know how packets are being sent through the internet, how the data is being transferred across the other part of the world. But we can see each other right now. We can talk to each other. So we can use the technology pretty well, right? And this is what I want to explain to people. Like, they don't need to be afraid of it.
So you are getting Bitcoin to be used as a means of exchange in circular economies.
Yeah.
And as we know, it's also a store of value for some people. What was it for you when you first came in?
What was it for me? Part of me, I would lie if I wouldn't say that I wanted to, like, okay, let's make some more money. So one of the initial motivations was also that, I was a student. I was searching for ways to, get by, make some money. I used to do trading when I was 17 on Forex, and I was quite successful with that. But then my parents stopped it because they were like, okay, you need to do the, final exams in your high school, so you cannot do trading anymore. So I stopped it, and then I get back to it when I got to Bitcoin. I did it for some months, and I realized I'm wasting my life away just clicking 2 buttons. I was like, I'm not providing any value, like what I'm doing here. So I realized, no, that's not for me. And then over time, when I got more into the Austrian economy and libertarian mindset, I realized it's a tool for change. It's a tool to separate money and state. And this is where I slowly transitioned from more the monetary aspect of Bitcoin, more into the philosophic and kind of the peaceful revolutionary aspect of Bitcoin. So that's it for me right now. But of course, initially it was more like also a speculation tool. I would lie if I would say no.
Yeah, most of us come in from money go up, and it is a big reason why people need it, right? Because a lot of people realize that their money is going down in value, or they're not going to have enough. They don't have enough. So yeah, I understand. Tell us a little bit about why the separation of money and state is so important.
Yeah, I mean, this is, I think, if I would distill, or if I would say the mission of Bitcoin in the simplest form, I think it's the separation of money and state. Over time, over the history of mankind, whoever gripped control of money were the the person or a group of people that misuse it for their own benefit against everybody else using it. And we could see that in old times, like stones, the rice stones on the Yap Island, where suddenly when they figure out how to make them more efficiently, the inflation kicked in. Or we saw it in Rome with coins like Antoninianus or Denarius, where they went from 97% of silver all the way down to less than 5% of silver. Why? Because the government or the Caesar or like the emperor realized, okay, people are not willing to pay such a huge taxes. So how I can tax them? I just reduce the amount of silver in the coins. And then the inflation kicked in. This is actually how I explain inflation to kids mostly. Imagine one day, or you're in Rome selling bread for 1 silver coin, a bread. And the next day somebody comes with a new coin. There's the same number 1 on it, but suddenly this coin is just 50% of silver that it was yesterday. So what's your rational thing to do? You increase the prices. You double the price because you want the same amount of silver. That's the valuable part in it. So this is kind of how inflation happens, is that we want the value. We don't want the number to be the same. We want the value, the purchasing power to be the same. That's why the businesses and business owners are rising prices, because they understand the value is going down, or the value of money is going down. So this is kind of happening organically, emergently. And to see it in these silver coins, it's kind of much easier to understand than with our paper money and printing. So yes, I mean, we as mankind, we need to separate money and state for us to live in a much peaceful and harmonic society. And it's actually why our name MTH came to be, because we were sitting with Gabriel, with my co-founder, a few years ago in a kitchen in my apartment, and thinking like, okay, so what the Bitcoin really means to us. And of course, we talked about freedom, but how does the world look like when we have freedom? And we thought it's a world where there's more cooperation between people. If we have one standard of value measurement, meaning Bitcoin, we can communicate better. Just like imagine if we have one language. It's kind of inefficient to have so many languages. Of course, culturally it happened, but for mankind to cooperate, it's not very efficient. Imagine every country would have a different measuring unit of a meter. So Croatian meter is this one, Slovakian meter is that one. It would be impossible to build bridges, to build houses. So in mathematics, we have one language of universe, which is math. And basically everybody agrees on that. We don't create different types of math. So the same applies for measurement of value. So we could be more cooperative. And if governments cannot corrupt money and print that, they cannot finance infinite and stupid wars, because people will not be willing to pay them for that. They will need to borrow, and nobody will be like giving them money for it. Just like, in the Rome, they needed to devalue. So this is the world we imagined can happen when Bitcoin wins. And there is the word in English called amity, which means cooperation, fellowship, friendship, and harmony. And that's exactly the world that I imagine to be when Bitcoin wins. So we actually just put together 2 words. Like, I think we saw Bitcoin as a tool that can bring us to the age of cooperation, to the age of harmony, to the age of amity. And we just flipped the words, becoming amity age. And then we created this little girl. Her name is Amity Nakamoto, and she's our mascot. She's granddaughter of Satoshi, because Satoshi disappeared. He's no longer with us here. And his granddaughter is somebody who is willing to take the torch and continue the education journey. So we kind of played with this story a little bit, creating Amity, and Amity is kind of becoming our voice of the company. So yeah, that's kind of a playful way to look at the brand as well. So yeah, that's why, coming back to your original question, separation of money and state, this is what I feel like we need to do as a humanity, so we can progress, we can prosper, we can innovate more, and not kind of be dependent on government's whim and decisions to do with money what they want to do.
Because people in those positions tend to get greedy.
Of course. It's kind of, I don't want to generalize, but it's a human nature. We are profit-seeking creatures. We want to survive. That's how we are coded in our DNA. So we are selfish, but also in a positive way. I mean, the more in a society where people are selfish, and that's capitalism, people tend to prosper. In societies where the selfishness and profit-driven seeking is eliminated, there's poverty and hunger. That's communism and things like that. So Even Ayn Rand, I don't know, probably you know her, she wrote a beautiful book called The Virtue of Selfishness, where she kind of describes why being selfish is not a wrong thing, right? And yeah, so this is kind of what I believe is necessary, and yeah, so that's what Bitcoin can help us kind of get us to the society of where people cooperate better between each other. And of course, it's not about stealing stuff or taking stuff, but providing value, voluntary exchanging. That's what we can achieve with Bitcoin.
Yeah, because really, Bitcoin is a peaceful movement of leaving this system and
Yeah,
moving over to the other, right?
totally. Totally. It's the most peaceful revolution we can have. We don't need to go to street and protest. We don't need to get elected to government structures and try to change it from within. We can create a parallel system. And this is actually what the parallel polis, the original idea was stemming from. So in communist Czechoslovakia in 70s, there was this guy named Václav Benda, and he was one of the signature of Chart 77. And he said, like, there are three ways to change things. You either go in the structures and try to change it from within, or you go to the streets and protest, or you build your parallel solution. And this is what they were doing. They were teaching kids after the propaganda school ended in homes. They were teaching their kids the real things. They were having parallel media and newsletters and newspapers. They were having parallel culture, which was not influenced by the communist propaganda. And this is what he said is the way that how we can really change things. And he said a beautiful thing as well, that the true free society is one that tolerates parallel structures. If parallel structure like Bitcoin is not tolerated, then it's not a free country to live in.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So tell us a little bit about how you teach children.
Mm-hmm. So when teaching children, we always start with the history of money and what is money. I get very inspired by a book, the Bitcoin Money book, which is this short story about kids searching for better money in a village called Bitville. And it's a beautiful story about how they are discovering properties of money, what works, what doesn't work, and so on. So we always touch first what is money, how it works, the history of money, couple of stories of that. So we don't jump to Bitcoin yet. When we are teaching Bitcoin Diploma, which is this perfect curriculum from Mi Primer Bitcoin from El Salvador, every class is full of games. Kids playing games on barter, and they are understanding the efficiency and inefficiency of barter. Suddenly, when we introduce money being this macaroni pasta thing, suddenly they can trade so much more efficiently, and the whole game takes just a minute instead of 10 minutes before. So they understand, okay, so having something that we agree on is like a measuring unit of money. It's pretty efficient. Then we play games around inflation and Cantillon effect. So we distribute these macaronis out of whim, only like to friendly kids. And the others are like, why I'm not getting more macaroni? Why is this money going to these guys, right? And this is what's happening in our society. The new printed money going to military industries and Wall Street, and not ending in people's head. And suddenly, once the money gets into the system, the prices are so much higher. So kids are exploring that while betting, kind of like an auction for a candy. And first, if there is not so much money in the system, the winning bid is, let's say, 10 macaroni. Then we introduce new money into the system. So the next round, the winning bid is like 50 macaroni. In the end is like 200. And the candy didn't change its property. Sometimes we even do shrinkflation. So in the third round or during the rounds, we either put less candies that they are bidding for or lower quality or smaller one. And even the price is like triple the price of before. So they kind of understand that, okay, if we have more money in the system, we are actually more careless. We don't treat that money, we treat them differently than before when there is a scarcity of those money. So they kind of understand these concepts that normally we teach them only in high schools or universities. They learn them when they are 10, 12, 15, 16. And they learn them by experiencing. And this is so much more profound, and this sticks with them because they have the experience of like, hey, somebody got more money and why I don't? Or suddenly the price just goes up and why? And this is actually very, very important to teach in this experiential way. That's how we do it.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So you use Me Premier Bitcoin course to help with kids.
Yes, yes, we do that as well. We have our own classes as well, but we here in Roatan we mostly use Me Premier Bitcoin. Then we do like one-to-one consultations or specific workshops. But for kids and for schools, we mostly use Me Premier Bitcoin with our own little enhancements, games that we added and developed. But yeah, that's the core curriculum.
And who gets to come? Who gets to decide who comes? And do you find some kids like it more than others?
So we go to schools ourselves. So we work with schools directly. Initially, when we set up the academy, we were kind of thinking, hoping that we can do majority of the classes here. But knowing and understanding reality of Roatan is, taught us that it's not very possible because it's hard for people to travel. It's kind of expensive. Not everybody has a car or motorcycle. So instead of driving 20 kids here with a bus, it's just one teacher or two teachers going to school. So it's so much easier for us. So we have it as a headquarters. We do classes here as well, mostly graduations of Bitcoin diploma or specific workshops. But in general, during the year, we go to schools ourselves and do it right there. And how we decide? We just come to a school, tell them what we do, and the school principals and teachers can decide if they want it or not. We had some schools before they were very skeptical, and they were like, no, it's Bitcoin, it's a scam. We're like, well, if you don't want us to teach Bitcoin, we are okay with that. We can only teach history of money, what is money, barter, and this kind of stuff, and we don't touch Bitcoin. So some of them actually agreed on that, but once they saw how we teach, they're like, okay, I think this makes sense, and even they understood like, wow, if the fiat system works this way, what is the solution? Like, guys, how do you see the solution? And then we brought Bitcoin. Sometimes we educated first the teachers and parents. So the parents were skeptical. We're like, no problem. Let's make you a class about Bitcoin for you guys first, and then you decide if you want it for kids or not. And they loved it, and we continued. There's one school here that recently we reached out, and they are like, nope, not right now, because they're very, let's say, supported by the current government, which is more socialist leaning in Honduras. So they don't want to touch Bitcoin at all, and nothing like that. I'm like, yeah, we don't want to go where they don't want us, right? We want to do education for somebody who really wants to learn, and we are not the ones who are like, pushing it to somebody's throat. So right now we work with a couple of schools on a regular basis. Some of them decided that they want to have Bitcoin diploma as a fully like a thing in the curriculum. So every kid in a 6th or 7th grade will go through it, right? So with those we work, on a regular basis.
Wow, very cool. And how wonderful to learn, at that age. It would have helped so many of us.
Yeah, I'm jealous of them. I'm like, if I were your age knowing about Bitcoin, damn, it would be so cool.
So tell us a little bit about your mining in Paraguay and Ethiopia. And also tell us about how and why mining is so important to Bitcoin.
Yeah, so why mining is important? Bitcoin is a decentralized network that doesn't have a central bank, doesn't have somebody who decides on the order of transactions. And this is very important. When we want to have money, we need to know which transaction happens first and which the second. So when Satoshi was like, okay, we don't want to have a central bank, who's going to do it? Well, let's introduce a competition where anybody can do it, but not like kind of creating new money out of thin air, but you need to prove that you did the work, and only once every 10 minutes, somebody of you will win this lottery, and you are the ones who can put an order to a transaction. You will add this page into a book of Bitcoin transactions, being blockchain, and we do it in this way that anybody can participate, and you really need to prove that you did the work. Just like with the gold mining, there is no central institution that owns gold and was releasing it to public over the course of 5,000 years. That's what a lot of shitcoiners and scammers are doing. Like, they create their own gold, let's say, and they're the only ones kind of giving it out. With Bitcoin, it was like, just like with gold, just take a pick, go to ground, dig, and try your luck, right? And every gold that you hold is a proof of work itself, because it couldn't be created in a lab You couldn't just put two atoms together to create gold. You needed to be dig from the ground sometimes in the past. So why Bitcoin mining is important? Because it is a process of distributing Bitcoin on a very fair basis across the world. Anybody can participate. The more you put in, the more Bitcoin you can make in the end. It's a fair competition. It's a very profit-driven and capitalist-driven system without any subsidies or anybody's kind of being more rewarded on something. If you have the same machines, your revenue is basically the same across the world. The only thing you're competing is the cost side. And it's a fair way how to distribute Bitcoin. It protects the Bitcoin network from change of the history, from rewarding or rewinding the history, changing your transaction status or your balance. It's more than the gold mining. Gold mining is basically only bringing gold into the system. The Bitcoin mining is protecting the network, ordering the transactions, making the Bitcoin more resilient and robust. So super important element of the whole system. So we as miners, we are basically something like a security guards of Bitcoin. We, as a guy with a gun standing in front of the bank, we're just waiting there, not shooting people, and we are being rewarded on a constant basis of our security work. Let's call it this way. So we ended up in Paraguay because of the price of Bitcoin, price of electricity there being very low, and that Paraguay is the largest electricity exporter in the world. So this was very interesting. And they have a huge amount of hydropower. 100% of that is of the consumption of Paraguay is hydro. It was very interesting. And whatever they don't consume, they need to sell to Brazil for a fraction of a cost. So that's where we ended up. And then there were some developments of the price that the government increased the tariffs, which weren't very happy. But this is where the governments can do whatever they want. So even in mining, you plan your business case based on a couple of variables that you want it to be fixed, but it's always a variable that can change out of a whim. So that's where mining is a tough business because, the difficulty is increasing, the price can sometimes change, but this is where we need to be like a global, thinking about the whole thing in the global terms and basically, searching for the best places around the world that offer cheap price and stability, right? So yeah, that's why Paraguay, that's why Ethiopia, which are again not the stablest countries, I would say. It's not Switzerland, but every country has its own trade-offs. And from my experience, more developing countries or the developing countries need Bitcoin more because there you can really feel the things are being broken and Bitcoin can fix those. So I live in Honduras and I'm from Slovakia, so I can really compare Slovakia to Honduras in these financial terms.
Yeah, well, that's very interesting. And it obviously benefits the countries to have the mining there. So there's a benefit for them too.
Yeah, for example, in Ethiopia, it's interesting that there's already a lot of miners, right? So the country is already providing or like hosting a lot of hundreds of megawatts of power. We mostly search for countries that has high amount of hydropower that's not being used, because in some countries the miners are being treated like these are the bad guys that are stealing our electricity, right? While in the countries with huge supply, this argument doesn't make sense because you're the one who's buying something that would otherwise be a waste. The analogy I'm giving for this is like imagine you own a bakery and you're baking croissants, and every evening there's some croissants that you didn't sell, nobody's going to buy them tomorrow. So you basically either eat them or throw them out. And imagine every evening at 6 p.m. when you're closing, there's somebody coming and says, I'm going to buy all your croissants that you have ever left, like everything. But I'm not going to pay you €1 as you sell them during the day. I'm going to pay you 10 cents for each. Will you sell them? Of course, because otherwise it's a waste. And the same what the miners are doing. They come to a place, they say, I will buy how much you are willing to give me, but I cannot pay you huge amounts. I only pay you a fraction because otherwise the business doesn't make sense for me. And it makes so much sense for the country to do it because otherwise it's a waste, right? So that's why Ethiopia, and an interesting thing about Ethiopia as well is that when I went there for the first time to Addis Ababa, there's a lot of buildings that are unfinished. And I was asking our local travel guide, she born and living in Ethiopia, like, why is this happening? Like, what was the reason behind it? She told me, they ran out of dollars and they cannot buy windows, bricks, and material anymore because nobody's willing to accept the local currency outside of the country. And it's almost impossible for them to convert it to dollars. I'm like, okay, that's interesting. So what happens is that the biggest developers in Ethiopia are becoming coffee exporters, but not for the reason that they love coffee, but for the reason that this is the easiest way that you can get to dollars, to foreign currency. And then they receive dollars and then they can pay for bricks and windows to finish the buildings. And right now with Bitcoin mining, basically all the miners are required to pay with dollars for the electricity. And this becoming next year, as the data went, and this guide told us, that it will become the biggest source of dollars for Ethiopia, bigger than coffee. So for the country, it's a beneficial thing because then they can decide to either, use it as dollars or change it for a local currency or do whatever. But suddenly they have a currency that's kind of very strong because imagine the Ethiopian beer last year, it inflated by 30%. The year before, about 40. So imagine a country they were even happy that the inflation was only 30%. This is super sad. The people are losing purchasing power, like 1/3 being gone in a year. That's crazy, right? And so imagine I come there with dollars. If you pay, for example, with your credit card, the official exchange rate is 1 to 60, roughly, $1.60 beers. If you change your dollars in cash for local currency, you have a double the amount. So the unofficial rate is 120. So whatever you pay with local cash is basically 50% cheaper for you. And this is kind of the free market telling to the government, like, yeah, guys, you think your currency, your shitcoin is this valuable? I'm sorry, the market thinks it's this valuable. There's a huge discrepancy. The same happened in Argentina, with pesos having these blue market rates. So, in the end, sadly, the locals are the ones hurt the most. They cannot save in that currency. It's almost impossible for them to get to dollars. So the mining can bring change to it. One of our partners that we have in Ethiopia, he actually restarted the local textile factory. So in the south of Ethiopia, around the area of Havasa, there was a textile factory for years, but it went out of business because there was no demand. And what he did, he built like a 2 or 3 miles electric power supply, brought it to the textile factory. He's running his one little container there, so doing the mining, but he, with his own money, built it. And suddenly the textile factory have a power and they can start to operate, so they start to employ people again. So these are kind of like a small examples how Bitcoin can help, as well how mining can help. And but of course, every government kind of also has their own, let's say, motivations. So there's still kind of a discrepancy if the government should mine Bitcoin or shouldn't, if they give permits to these guys or that guys. So there's also politics regarding to that. So it's not only black and white. It's a spectrum.
Yeah, so you've touched on quite a few points how Bitcoin can change humanity. How has Bitcoin changed you?
Bitcoin made me think about future more. It made me spend less money on stupid things. Bitcoin made me more careful about savings, about thinking upfront, about being more minimalist than a spender. And Bitcoin gave me a hope that something can be done with the monetary system. Because I was recently speaking to my friend about, imagine these Austrian economists after 1971, after the separation of gold standard, and with a more globalized society, knowing that we cannot basically return to gold. It's so inefficient in the global digital world that we cannot use it as a basis of money very much. And governments are against it anyway. So I would be very depressed from 1971 to 2009, not knowing that there is a tool that can really get us back to the principles and to really show us a way how we can really separate money and state. So this is what gives me hope that we finally have the tool, and I'm happy to believe, and I'm blessed to live in the era where we can really make it happen. Because for hundreds and thousands of years, the government always had power over people. They always had could enforce, steal your gold, these executive orders in 1933. But with Bitcoin, the ownership is the knowledge of 12 words. It's kind of very hard to get it out of your head. You can have multiple hidden wallets in your treasures. So this plausible deniability is super strong. I mean, it's such a powerful tool that I don't think we unleash the power of it so far fully. And the governments are seeing that they cannot stop it, and they kind of need to jump on board of that, somehow, work with Bitcoin. So this kind of like gives power to the individual. And this is what really is inspirational for me, and how I feel empowered that I control my own money, and I don't need to be afraid like, okay, what if I will not be wanted, or if I will be, seen as a bad guy, they can stop my account. Not with Bitcoin. Actually, yesterday I was giving a class to lawyers here in Roatan and the real estate agency, because there start to be people coming here that want to buy properties with Bitcoin. And the real estate agencies, they don't know how to handle it. They don't know how to exchange it. So we are actually offering the OTC services. If somebody is willing to pay with Bitcoin, we can do the swaps and send dollars. This is how we also sustain the academy. So the mining and the OTC helps to finance the education. And they were asking like, okay, so you're saying that nobody can, seize my account? Like nobody can just censor it and close it down? I'm like, no, if you have this hardware wallet and you know your 12 words, you're the only person who can really move the money. If you mess up your backups and forget these 12 words, you cannot move it anymore, right? But they were like so inspired and shocked by that reality that, wow, so no, the government really cannot stop it. Like, and there used to be a big history of banks messing up with people's money here in Honduras. So for them, having a tool like that, it's a big game changer.
Do you think volatility for now affects how people adopt Bitcoin?
Yes, definitely. I mean, we would love our lives to be stable, although universe is furthest from stability as anything can be. Our brains were designed to search for comfort and stability. If something thousands of years ago worked, why would you change it? Because you survived. If suddenly you see grass moving and you thought like, okay, maybe it's not a tiger, it's just the wind. You jump in and there was a tiger, your genes were gone. So we're basically descendants of people who were afraid, who were searching for stability and not changing stuff. So our brains, they don't like volatility in general, but our whole lives are volatile. We do decisions every day. We are speculators with everything, where to go to eat, which work to go to, which school to go to. So if people are like, oh, no, I don't like speculation, man, you're speculating every single day with every decision and deciding on everything like, will I buy this or will I buy that? Will I eat that? Will I be a vegan or a carnivore? What's better for me? So you're deciding every day with everything. So the only constant is that everything will be changing. So I think Bitcoin for us is a tool that can prepare us for even more volatile world with all AI coming in, new jobs being created. I mean, the world is just starting to be super volatile. Look at the politics, look at the conflicts around the world. I mean, Bitcoin can be for us a nice school to learn that volatility is a thing, not searching for something constant. So for perceived stability in fiat, you're paying with decrease of your purchasing power over long term, right? That's why we're saying that Bitcoin is not a tool how to get rich, it's a tool how to not get poor over time. So yes, but the question was if people are discouraged. Many of them are. And then what we try to do is to show them the positive side of volatility. So they can still keep some money in stable sets, in Blink, for example, or if they want to, they can have USDT or stable coins in general. South America is big on stable coins, and I don't judge them for it. I mean, we cannot just deny reality and want everybody to adopt Bitcoin just like that. There is some transition period, right? And for countries where their currencies are messed up, like Ethiopia, like Argentina and Venezuela, the next step for them is dollarization, at least keeping value stable for a little bit longer than with their own currencies. And then once they are pretty well dollarized, they can evolve into a Bitcoin society, because just jumping there, it's a huge thing you want from them. Somebody who gets it, that's perfect. but rather let's do it continuously, not kind of disruptively, because that's what can mess up the whole adoption. If we force people to use Bitcoin, or if we just, don't be afraid of volatility, just jump in and everything will be fine. I mean, especially right now, there might be a correction soon. We don't know. So we need to be careful with that.
Well, I love your approach. I love the name of your company, and you are
you.
one of those people who are really going for it and helping the word of Bitcoin get out to more people. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Paula, very much. It was a big pleasure.